Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second part here at, well, one of the many other parts here actually at the festival. I hope you all enjoyed your break. And of course also the SMEs who presented during the break. I know we certainly enjoyed our break here. We're continuing with a really great session with some stellar speakers. So we are graced today by the presence of Piia Karjalainen. Sorry, I always mess that up a little bit. Hey, Piia. So she's the Secretary General of the MaaS Alliance. We also have Frachet, who is the Executive Director of MobilityData, and our very own Gert, Tant, the CTO of OASC. So we'll be talking about data and mobility and kind of the difficulties, the steps we need to take in terms of sharing data in the context of mobility ecosystems. We all know when it comes to data, a lot of it is about mobility. It's one of those problems we all have as cities because they're well, they're cities, right? So it's a hot topic, I think, with any city who's looking to towards technology to solve, not just the economic ways, but also the environmental impact, the general, happiness levels in the city. I think we're all kind of looking at good solutions and ways to kind of tackle those problems. So the speakers here today are all involved in some way with those aspects, and what we really want to focus on are the data aspects and what they do. So the way we'll structure the session is the speakers will present first, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion afterwards to see where we get. And of course, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, either in the Zoom or on the YouTube channel. And we'll try to get those to the speakers on time so we can have an engaging session here. So without further ado, Piia, I pass the word to you. Feel free to introduce yourself further and so forth. Thanks.
Yes, so good evening, everyone, and good morning for some of you. So first of all, thank you for Open and Agile Smart Cities for inviting me here. It's almost a tradition to start a year with your event, and I just said to Davor in the backstage that it's always really inspiring, sort of like get the latest news and views from the cities across the world, and also discuss how we see and perceive the future and the upcoming challenges. Well, of course, I think we all do hope that this year will be a bit more easier and smoother for us than the last year was. But on the other hand, I also feel that last year was a really great time for some learnings, and also for the urban mobility and mobility perspective, it was really also a turning point that I feel that we can use to sort of like make our transport system for good, a bit more resilient and a bit more sustainable. So I will spend the forthcoming 10 minutes to describe a bit how we see the mobility ecosystem to be developed from the Mobility as a Service Alliance and Mobility as a Service perspective. So I am representing MaaS Alliance, which is a public-private partnership global association where we have a bit more than 100 members at the moment from Europe, Japan, Australia, Northern and Southern America, and we are working together indeed to create that smart mobility ecosystems based on digital services for benefits of the users, societies, and also for our environment. So the mobility as a service, as a solution, it has been discussed around 10 years now, and our alliance, MaaS Alliance, was turning 5 years last year in October. And well, now when I look back those 5 years, what we have worked together with mobility as a service, I, on the other hand, feel that we have gone very far away from our original starting point. So there has been so many deployments around the cities, around the world, and different business model, different operations with different target groups and all that. And on the other hand, what I feel is that we are not at all ready yet. But today, when I know that we are discussing about ecosystem, I think that is also one of the learnings what we have to take with us is that when we are working with the ecosystems, we are never actually ready. In the point when we are ready, when we in the point when we have accomplished our project, so to say, it's only the starting point where the interaction will start bringing the ecosystem and different partners forward. And that is also the reason why when talking about ecosystems, we cannot maybe use words controlling or planning too much. It's sort of like an interaction and iterative manners what we have to be able to work together in future. But with mobility as a service, I think when it comes to different operations and solutions, they are up and running in different cities around the world. Now the challenges are really a lot in the scalability of the services, lowering down the scalability cost for the service providers, working with the harmonization, reducing the market fragmentation, and ensuring that the services what we develop, they are really sustainable for our societies and also for the environment. So last year with MaaS Alliance members, both public and private, what we have in the membership, we also spent some time to analyze the biggest challenges when developing MaaS and smart mobility solutions, the members named 4 challenges there. First was about the business models. I don't go into that discussion because it was really discussed a lot last year in the different forums. The second issue was about collaboration and lack of trust in ecosystems. Third one was about the market fragmentation and scalability, and fourth one was about data and myriad of data standards and fragmentation in that regard. And maybe also the unwillingness to share data. And if I briefly sort of like just describe those tasks or issues, I really want to start with the trust, because that now, in my thinking, that is the most critical challenge or most critical issue what we have to be able to overcome together. The lack of trust can appear in the different fronts. It can be there in the public-private relationship. We don't yet know how actually to work well together. It can be there between service providers and the users, which is then also issue when it comes to uptake of the different services, and it can be also sort of like a between the industry and the regulators, because we don't know yet exact impacts or direction of the development of the sector. So the trust issue is definitely something what we have to work around with. But the good news is that I think that in this situation, it's the regulation can be very well used to build trust, and it's. I also think that it's one of the sort of like a best way to use regulation at this current market development phase is to use it to build trust. That means that we should focus on creating level playing field for the different actors, still facilitate the access to data, access to market, and fair competition, so that everyone feels comfortable in the market. But also regulation is there then to sort of like build the similar rules to reduce the market fragmentation within EU, but also across the different main markets. Then the governance, what in our sort of language we use to describe the local or regional setting or like a set of rules, what we can use to describe what kind of development we want to encourage in that certain environment. The role of the governance is then to, first of all, remain business model and technology neutral, so that it really gives a boost in different operations in that ecosystem, but also it's the place where we should really make sure that we deliver the societal values. The societal goals can depend on the specific region or market. They can be focusing on sustainability, accessibility, affordability, or be even more specific that you want to reduce congestion, you want to reduce number of vehicles on your mobility system, or you just want to reduce, for instance, the public spending. Anything goes there, and it can be indeed designed locally, but the governance model should support that achievement of the goals. and it should also give a direction how we ensure the accountability and measure the achievement of those goals. What is important to know is that often there are also some subsidies or there are some incentives for different mobility models or mobility or different modes. What we have learned from our experience in MaaS Alliance that those incentive subsidies, they are playing a quite big role in determining the user behavior. So as a part of that governance models, it's important then to pay also attention that all incentives like taxation and subsidies, they are indeed supporting also your primary policy goals. And finally, also going back to a bit more closer what we are discussing today about data management or data governance. For mobility as a service, we need that common language and common sort of like tools to communicate. And we are working for minimum data models for in the one hand, and also minimum interoperability mechanism for the APIs to support that interoperability of the services. So very briefly, that was what I wanted to say here in the beginning. I think in the end there will be a lot of room and space for the discussion, and also if there are any questions, I'm of course very happy to answer to your questions.
Thanks, Piia, for the presentation. I think it was a great overview also of the challenges that are ahead. Of course, I particularly liked the emphasis there also on the minimal interoperability and kind of those aspects, but I don't want to run ahead of speakers or the discussion we're going to have later. So I think it's a good time to move to the next speaker and Gert, and then we'll try to kind of bring that all together. So Leo, if you are ready.
Yes, thanks.
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
So I'm the Executive Director of MobilityData. A few words should give you some understanding of who we are and what we are doing. We are a Canadian-based non-profit. We are in Montreal. We have just a bit like MaaS Alliance members all around the world. And the way we are working is, our goal is to bring together 4 different types of stakeholders. We have members which are public transit agency like LA Metro in Los Angeles or STIB in Brussels. We have software vendors who are companies who are selling software to those companies. Like, for example, in Europe, we have Kisio in France, or we have Ito in Great Britain. We have government, like the Japanese Department of Transportation. In Europe, we have quite a few national access points, which are members, and quite a few state DOTs in the US. And we also have mobility apps, because our focus is on passenger information. So for the mobility apps that are being used, for example, we have Apple Maps, which is member, Google Maps, which is member, Moveit, which is member, and last month here, the German and Dutch company joined us. So what do we do? As I said, we are focused on the question of passenger information, and we are in charge of 2 data formats, GTFS, which is the most widely used data format for public transit, and GBFS, which is the most widely used data format for shared mobility. When we speak about shared mobility, we are speaking about bike share, car share, scooter share, everything share, so all that shared mobility ecosystem. So what do I mean when I said that we are in charge of those data formats? We have a kind of holistic approach of those data formats, which means that obviously we are working on the specifications themselves. We are gathering stakeholder feedback. They are asking us, oh, we have launched that new things which cannot be represented. Could you extend those data formats? We have internally in our staff data experts who are doing the research, doing the need analysis, building draft of extension of those specifications, and then moderating the community conversation around those 2 data formats so that we could move to adoption officially of those extension of data format. We are also holding the hands of the first implementation. So we are having direct conversation with the stakeholder that I mentioned above, public transit agency, software vendors, to ease the adoption. For example, the state of California have paid a software vendor in San Francisco to describe in GTFS all the fare structure of the Bay Area, so all the agglomeration around San Francisco. So we are reviewing those data sets to ensure that that new specification is addressing the need. But we go further than that. We have resource centers. We are providing trainings. Last year, we provided training in English, French, and Spanish. And the target for 2021 is, on top of those 3 languages, to add German and also Japanese, because we are receiving a lot of requests on that from the Japanese government. But we also have software vendors, because for us, creating the rules is not enough. We have created a canonical GTFS validator, which is a software on which the whole community have agreed on, so that if you run that validation on your dataset and it is being flagged as being valid, we agree on what it is. And you're not going to have another stakeholder with another software telling you that they have a different answer. For example, on that, like Google accepted to use that validator and even contributed to the code. So agencies will not have different kind of answer from what they have and what Google is telling them, which was a huge challenge for them in the past. We know that automatized validation is not enough, because it also has to match what is on the street, the reality, and that cannot be automatized. So thanks to a partnership with the state of California, we developed a grading scheme, which is something which is manual because it cannot be automatized, and it is allowing to check between what is in the street, what are like on the bus poles, and what is in the data set to grade. And the goal is not to give a bad grade. The goal is to help the agency in a very, very practical way to improve the quality of their data set, and by that to improve the quality of the information that their passenger are receiving. Finally, we are also in charge of open mobility data, which is the website, so a service. It used to be called transit feeds, and it has been given to us. It is a repository, a worldwide repository of open data set, because the question of discoverability of the data set is also a challenge. You can think of that as a worldwide data portal or a world access point, to take the concept of national access point to a world level. Currently, it is handling GTFS, and we are working on adding GBFS, and also we are working hand-to-hand with the NetX community to also add NetX support in the very short term. We have been founded in 2019. 1 year ago, we were 4 people. Today, we are 16, so we grew 4 times in the past year. And our challenges for 2021, to give you some kind of teaser of what is coming ahead, we are launching a working group about what has been called GOFS, so for on-demand services. So the taxi, we have partnered with a few taxi organizations at the governmental level, or the TNC, which need to be integrated in a standardized way. We are being asked to also work on the question of the use of GBFS for the cities and the specific needs that the cities have regarding GBFS. And we are receiving a few requests that you haven't made decision on regarding parking data, the description of what is the availability and the rules related to parking, and more question in North America regarding operational public transit data. So for us, 2020 was a challenging year, but was also our first real year. So we cannot hope to have the pandemic behind us and to be able to go full speed with all the skill set and all the challenges that we have in front of us.
Yeah, Leo, it's thanks. It's great to follow you guys, right? I remember our time in Montreal when you were kind of setting up, and you could see a lot of the startup electricity type of vibe in the air. So it's really good to see the growth you guys are seeing, the buy-in, and so forth. Before we kind of go to Gert's part. One of the questions we get from cities is like, okay, well, what do we choose, right? So which one we want to kind of manage this part in our data kind of infrastructure. So which model should we choose? Can you guys advise? And it's a really tough question, right? Because I mean, it's or isn't it? Does it matter or doesn't it? I think that so Piia, do you see things like that? Leo, do you encounter that? And Gert also feel free to kind of jump in, because you're actually the one I try to forward these requests to a lot of the time.
I can start. What I see is that there is a lot of questions, of course, towards GBFS and GTFS. I know also in the Netherlands they have the Tant API in the MaaS Alliance, which is also getting some ground there. What I see in cities now happening is that actually they most of the time they support several standards, and they need a way to be able to transform those standards to each other, because they all have their different purposes. The GBFS has a different purpose than we are mostly focused on NGSI LD, which is a broad scope. GBFS has a very more narrow scope, but has its own purpose. And I see cities that are building or using these transformations. Also in the Synchronicity project, there is a GTFS to NGSI transformation is built there. So that's what I see happening, and I think a lot of standards are moving towards JSON, LD, or linked data, and that will. I think that will greatly enhance the capability of being able to go from one model to another. But that's something that I see happening right now.
Any other answers from the speakers or thoughts on Gert's comments?
So on the question of what should city do, obviously it heavily depends on the regulation, the frameworks in which they're operating, and my advices would not be the same for a US city and for maybe a French city or a German city. But in the area in which they are allowed to act, obviously very often the advice is to recommend open data, to request open data, and to be specific with that. We are getting a lot of requests from cities who are asking us to guide them in what would be canonical way to phrase in RFPs what they want, because it is a huge challenge for them and a huge challenge for the software vendors which are answering that question. So this is something on which we are planning to work, helping the cities to know how to phrase those requests and what they are speaking about. The other thing is the question of KPI. Very often what we hear from cities is that they want a data portal. They want a huge number of data sets. The challenge is that having another data portal and having many data sets is not going to unlock many things, because when you look at data portal, you have sometimes 6 or 7 piled level of data portal. What you need to be focusing on is the question of quality, which is harder to measure. But this is why we have created Validator. That's why we have created grading scheme. We created the tools to measure the quality of the data. And the way you should be asking, like the KPI that you should be following is not the number, but the quality of the data set that you're making available.
Piia, any remarks before we go to Gert's part?
Well, not too many things add on the technical side, but just what I like have noticed in the mobility industry and when discussing with different cities, but also with service providers, I really feel that we are going in a better and healthier situation in that regards. That now I really see like more real partnership and real like a co-development between industry and between cities. So we are moving away from that really fragmented sort of like a situation that on the other hand, industry is working in one direction and then cities are maybe working in the other direction, but it's really sort of like doing things now together and being part of the same forums as it happens in the MobilityData, as it happens in the MaaS Alliance. And I think that is already not necessarily making things happen like faster or easier, but at least it makes sure that the solutions what we are designing, they are widely adopted.
Gert, this might be a good time for you to kind of present on how you see the MIMS fit into this. And I think what we do after that is look at some practical ways in which we can advance some of the topics here. So by all means, Gert,
okay. Thank you for the floor. And thank you all for being here. It was a great to be here, a great event. So I want to talk about the minimal interoperability mechanisms, which we, of course, as OAC are that's the thing we are driving. We are a demand-driven organization, and the MIMS are the things that we are doing for our city. So the minimal interoperability mechanisms. So the MIMS are about what we think are minimally needed for cities, and of course, and communities to exchange solutions, sources, and data. What is important there is how do cities gather their data, how do they get access to data, and how will they expose the data to other providers. So for example, you have these bike share organization that comes into a city. How is that relation with the city going? They need a license. Probably the city will ask, give us data. How will they provide that data? And how will the city reshare the data to others? Or what are the things they are allowed to do? Or what are the regulations? Could be that the data remains with the bike sharer and that he just gives access to the data in some way or another. So that's where the MIMS are about. They're adopted by about 150 cities, so that's quite a large number. They're very technical, so they're really focused on API and data formats. So they're not about legal. They can of course be adopted into these procuring documents or licensing documents, but they are focused on technical points. So they're a point in technical architecture, and they're an inclusive list of baselines. So they're not only the list that we are having, but that we are having now, but they can be extended to other ones. So we're right now also looking towards building like RecCore, but we're also looking towards GBFS or OGC, which are the geospatial data models. So they are actually open. It depends actually on the cities what they want to achieve there. So they're based actually on a consensus among cities. And they are vendor neutral and technology agnostic. So they are technical, but they are APIs, they are data formats, but they're not depending on some kind of database or some kind of, on blockchain or whatever. They can be independent of that. There is, of course, an implementation needed. And what is important for the MIMS is that there are implementations. So what we propose towards cities and communities should be able to be implemented by parties and preferably different parties. The idea behind the MIMS is if cities implement these MIMS, these interoperability points, solutions can actually be deployed across cities. So they can actually, there can be a solution, a mobility solution, like for example, travel to a city in a smart way using intermodal traffic. That solution should be able to be used also in another city, which has the same data feeds. That's actually the idea behind it. And there are data models, as we all know, and APIs are very important for this. Today we have about 5 MIMS, where 2 of them are under development. So one is the context information management, is actually being able to get in data and then actually to able to broker that data. What is very important here that since the last version of the, for example, the NGSI LD specification, also federation is possible there. So you can actually federate across different brokers. So it could be that a bike sharer or some mobility provider, like for example, public transport company, has its own broker, that he actually remains the owner of the data, but that a central broker is referring to his broker to be able to give others access to the data. If he wants to revoke that access, is of course possible at his end. So that's actually very important, in my opinion, that federation is also possible, so that the data doesn't have to be centrally somewhere. It also gives people much more control over how their data is accessed and those things. Then we have, of course, the common data models. We need to agree on what type of data model you are. I think the point that Leo gave there is very important. You need to know what is the quality, how does it look like, is it valid, is the schema valid that you are providing us, because that's the way you're accessing the data, and you want to have trust on the data that you have, that you can really use it. And then, of course, there's some kind of marketplace needed. How do you give access to those to the data? What are the licensing agreements? You don't want somebody to access your data, for example, every microsecond. Maybe there is some SLA you want to agree on there. That's something that happens on the marketplace. We are currently under development 2 extra MIMS, which I think could be very important into the mobility and transport sector. One is personal data management. For example, your personal, how you want to personally travel to a city is your personal data, and being able to use that in mobility apps could be a very an enhancement on these things. So the way I want to travel, if that can be used in those applications, that really would enhance my experience with those applications. So I think that's one we are really working on together with mydata.org, with, for example, Solid initiative from Tim Berners-Lee. And for example, also the CITRA initiative, the IHAN things. I also, in the MaaS Alliance, they're quite looking towards mydata and things like that quite heavily. So I think that there is a good alignment there. And then, of course, we have Fair AI. You will use some kind of algorithms on the data, being able to really estimate what would be the best travel route and things like that. There will be artificial intelligence used. You want to have trust on that artificial intelligence. I want that the user of your application trust you in doing the right things with their data. And that's where Fair AI is about, making it transparent, making it clear what is happening, making it actually more trusty towards your users. So I went through these, so they are explained more a bit more, but know that there are at this moment 5 MIMs. Today we are really focused on the NGSILD specification, which is an ETSI specification for MIM1, which allows broadcast of data. It allows federation, it allows ingest of data, and it allows broadcasting of data, being also capable of having subscription, notifications, querying, also geospatial querying. Actually, the data models that we use are quite heavily based on existing standards, like SAREF from 1M to M, CITYxCITY, GSMA, which is the mobility, schema.org. So really based on this, and also, for example, we have the GTFS models actually transferred towards NGSILD. And then, of course, we have the ecosystem transaction management, where we are quite heavily based on the things that TM Forum and the Fireware business ecosystem have been developed. As said, personal data management is based on mydata.org, Solid and IHAN, and on FairAI. We are really looking towards the initiatives that are happening in Amsterdam and in Helsinki regarding the AI registry. These are the benefits for the city. So if a city adopts these MIMs, they have choice, because they really can choose between different companies that implement these MIMs and are build solutions based on these MIMs. And they can actually look towards other cities, what they have done, and use the knowledge they have gathered in their city. So there will be quite good transfer between cities of solutions, really also large deployment of these solutions, which heavily tests these solutions also, and which makes them more solid and more robust for cities. Hopefully we have more value for money if a provider can sell his solution to a lot of more cities, like for example to 150 cities. He's capable of giving you a better price than he can only sell it to one city. So it also involves economic development, of course. For a business, it provides you scale. If you can really take that, go to different cities and really sell it and show that your solution works across cities, it gives you scale. And you can still largely keep on developing your product and iterate on it and deliver all those new services towards the cities you already are deployed. So the focus here is reducing risk for both the business and both the cities in having these solutions that builds on top of their data, and having more innovation and increased investment. I looked a little bit on what we have today as data models already on mobility, which are actually already on, for example, NGSILD, where we already have some kind of transformation ready. For example, the GTFS also already was translated towards NGSILD, and there is actually already an automatic translation possible, which was built, for example, in Synchronicity. We also have some separate documents, models in NGSILD that are based on, for example, EV charging, crowd flow of served and bike hire dock stations. But I think they're quite easily transferable, since the LD version also we can use really linked data to make these transformations possible. So which I think will be a great enhancement on the next things. And what I also noticed is that, for example, this is an architecture of a mobility system in Flanders. They actually included also a large set of having extra data into their systems, because transportation doesn't only include your route or stuff like that, but it also can include a lot of other things which could be interesting for you, like parkings and stuff like that. So all those things can be interesting, and they already start including that data in their architecture, and how will they be able to also work on that data, which I think is things that we are going on. All these vertical solutions, if you want to, will need information from the other verticals, and they will need to provide their data to other solutions. For example, a waste management solution could be very interesting for that waste management solution to know how the transportation or how the traffic is at that point in time. So that's how I see things evolving, and how I think the MIMs can help in having these solutions better. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Gert, also for that kind of a overview. I think with me, it kind of begs the question when I look at the essentially the NGSILD data models already incorporating a GTFS. So basically, if the data models are let's say well, open and they allow for conversions, that solves already a big part of the problem. But is that enough? Like, so what I'm trying to get at is from the perspective of the three speakers here, what would need to be done in terms of actors like these in the room today to kind of work on this almost universal kind of minimal interoperability, where you can recommend something that can branch out into whatever kind of ecosystem domain wherever you are. Is that something that kind of you have in the back of your mind when you do work? Is that needed? How do you see that? Are you was that clear, Piia or Leo or
I can start. I do not know if Piia was going to take it, but
okay.
I can
just
take it.
Whoever jumps is fine.
Yeah. So like City has a very key role in the question of open data, but again, it always depends of what type of in which country we are. In some country, like the city has if you take New York, for example, the city cannot touch anything related to transit because New York MTA is a completely distinct organization at the state level. So depending for each city, what is under their purview, yes, they have a key role in when they are doing the RFP, when they are subcontracting to operators to say what they want, say at the beginning, because then very often they are stuck for sometimes 3, sometimes 5 years, and sometimes the software vendor is also stuck on that side. So yes, it's very key for the cities to be advised, to know how they should be asking, and then to have that data being made available for everybody who could use it and have insight. One of the key challenges that we are facing is that the question of open data is something the goal of open data is an extremely valuable goal, but we also have the question of privacy regarding the traveler. And in some section like shared mobility, we could require every company every taxi company to publish in open source every ride which has been made, or just in real time the position of every taxi. But that would be by recording, allowing the people to just discover what has the ride which has been made, and there is privacy concern related to that. So something that we are hearing from cities, something that we are starting to foresee, and that will be one of the subjects on which we'll work on 2021, is that the city have to understand the distinction between what should be open for everybody and what is an information that they want to have access to, because they are the city and they have a regulatory power and they want to see more things of what is happening. And that distinction between what is fully public and what is, we call that authenticated, something which requires authentication, I think is as of today, January 2021, a big challenge and the source of many conversation around what should be done next. So yeah,
it's something we hear also talking to cities. We've over the past months organized a few roundtables talking to cities about kind of how do you see your role in this upcoming data sharing ecosystem, and it's something you see that it's not defined. It's something that cities are have learned already, but it's not set also on an individual basis or on a more general basis. So I think that's definitely something that's of value, right? Is any knowledge about how is a certain city handling it according to whatever or according to a specific context that is compatible to theirs. Piia, so one of the questions that I had pop up kind of irrespective of kind of the discussion here today is when I said I'm going to moderate, is one question I want to ask Piia is when you look at the alliance and you see all the kind of also the startups and all these up and comers, and it's quite a varied ecosystem, right? So everybody's to a certain extent also trying out, so what will work and so forth. So it's very diverse. I think it's a really cool group in general. But I was wondering, with the current situation in the world and public transport taking a hit and some of those models depending on a certain volume of rides, what impact do you see within your network has that had? And do you see any kind of changes that would have a longer lasting effect in terms of behavioral change that somehow translates to the whole industry?
Yeah, okay, maybe I start by just quickly commenting on what Leo was saying about the public procurements, because also in MaaS Alliance, I can just like confirm or second that we also do think that the public procurement can play really strategic role there by pushing forward and facilitating the cities' goals when it comes to data sharing or creating any kind of ecosystems. And basically the how to do it or how cities can play that role there is either sort of like a set of good ex ante criteria for procurements that certain standards are like use of certain standards are required, or sort of like APIs are defined, or then also as an ex post criteria, then the selected winner is then like obliged to share their data and for everyone else in the ecosystem, or sort of like widely deploy certain technical solutions. So it's really a powerful tool and not necessarily requiring any additional investments other than that funding, which is like of course reserved for the procurement itself. But then going to your question, I understood related to COVID and the whole phase of the development in mobility as a service. So of course, as MaaS is very much relying on the use of public and shared transport resources, and we really want to build the mobility as a service around the use of public, shared and active modes. I think we are still living quite difficult times because basically the demand and in some cases also the sort of like trust of the users to public and shared services is still relatively low. And that has also resulted the fact that some MaaS pilots which were scheduled for the last year, they had been postponed because we are not at all living in the normal conditions. But when looking towards future, I still very strongly believe, and it has been also seconded by several like consulting companies and market analysts, that actually the whole situation can work as an accelerator for mobility as a service. And that is basically because of the fact that we are already living in some kind of like turning point, that people and companies and countries and cities are really reconsidering their habits and structures and what kind of future we want to enable. So we are already maybe a bit more ready to do certain kind of changes. Then from several regulators and political parties, including European Union, but also different countries, we are hearing that now it's really time to take the climate challenge very seriously, and we have to decarbonize our transport system, which is serving the same goal that we use more public and shared services. And then finally, of course, the very nature of the mobility as a service is there that it provides very good passenger information. It provides you different transport options, different modes, bringing together. And now in the COVID times, there has been also new features included in the MaaS application where you can book your seat, you can see the occupancy of the different fleets or carriages, and you stay very well all the time informed about different measures when it comes to hygiene and cleanness of the vehicles. So overall, I think that this is boosting the MaaS development. And then what I also see there is that when MaaS started like 10 years ago, it was very much idea of that like a platform provided by IT companies or like a third party aggregators entering to the mobility as a service market. That model is very strong there still, but also we see more and more other models serving mobility as a service or providing MaaS services. Some of them are provided by public transport authorities or operators or organized by cities themselves. Also last year, it was big year for different corporation-led smart mobility solutions when it's employer or company taking that over or responsibilities about the community sustainable behavior. And I wouldn't be very much surprised if in future we will see also financial institutions, banks, and also housing and real estate developers entering to the mobility as a service schemes. So if you said that it's very sort of diverse today, I think it will be even more diverse tomorrow. And it's definitely good because we are 7 million different users and not all needs are the same, and therefore variety there also in the supply side. I think it's making it's just more successful.
So thanks, Piia. So I was wondering, Gert, from your perspective of kind of looking at MIMS and what role they can play in kind of various ecosystem. I know, for example, you've also been invited to data working groups within the MaaS Alliance and so forth. Based on kind of that limited runtime you've had there, do you see any, from a technical standpoint, opportunities for people like the MaaS Alliance, MobilityData, OASC to work on this kind of a minimal model forward that interfaces essentially the transport providers and the cities, and if they're the same, they're the same. But so that kind of a initiative that makes it clear, especially in the context of the upcoming data. Urban data platforms and Digital Euro program, but also when you look at the climate agenda and the commitment that's asked from cities there, we're looking at kind of a societal pivot, right? So I think it's cities that will be committing to a lot of those things, but of course they need to work with these providers and so forth to kind of get a grasp on this and work on that. What do you see there in terms of opportunity maybe for the next year to kind of have a look at?
Yeah, what I see is that in a lot of dossiers that are running right now, and also I presented towards the MaaS Alliance, the MIMS. I see a lot of questions towards we need some kind of standards. We need to be able to actually integrate with also other types of standards that are not necessarily mobility, but we need to get into the data, and also other verticals are asking mobility data because it helps them in enhancing their services. So there is really a hunger between the different verticals that are in cities, and also not only cities, because your transportation or your mobility doesn't stop at your city borders. It goes really across your borders, even your country borders. I see the MaaS Alliance talking between the Netherlands and Germany and Belgium on how they will handle those border traffics and stuff like that. So really a hunger towards really be able to interchange that data with each other and be able to enhance that interchange of data and really use the data. So I think there is a big opportunity to be handled there. I think also we have the GTFS, we have GBFS, we have NGSILD, we have there are different kinds of standards. I think we can really marry them in one way or another and see what will be minimal needed to really for because each has a different use case, and so they have their purpose. But we can find what is minimal needed to interchange the data between them, really to be able to access the data, and actually to get, for example, like Leo said, we want to have open data, but there is a large part of it will be closed. A large part of the data that is gathered by transportation companies is not, they can just publish it open. You can't publish the taxi rides of my personally to everybody. That's something that I even also wouldn't like. But you can publish some kind of that data, and how do you do that, and how do you handle that, and which standard do you do that, and what are then the levels? There is open data, but it could be that there is data that you share with other parties, and how do you handle that? I think that there are a lot of great things are happening there, and I think it's now a great time to also align them and to see what would be the great thing to interchange it between the verticals, and how would those open data platforms, that there are specifications that are going to be built, that are going to be set by the European Commission in different initiatives. How can we implement them on those urban data platforms? How do those verticals integrate with them? And how we can share that data in a great way. We also have the HAYA-X initiative that will allow us to really, between providers, share data in a really secure, trusted way, which also think will enhance things a lot. So I see a lot of great initiatives going on. I think the time is now to really have the discussion and see how we can build those interactions. And I think also the standards are there. That's a technical thing to interchange them. I don't think that that's a big issue. So I see a lot of great things happening there.
Cool. I think that was a big list of stuff that we might do. So I think it definitely merited some follow up from our side. I know there's quite a lot of cities who'd be keen to kind of get involved in this type of exercise. For example, Seppo Hataya of Tampere has been working on this for years. I'm sure he'd be quite keen. He's also a board member with us. He'd be keen to support that. One kind of more general question, and also again something I've been pondering in this kind of a weird last year. What you see is well, a lot of big companies, big administrations and so forth are rethinking kind of what an office is, and are looking to explore, okay, can we use this as maybe an impetus to change. And what you also see on a private level is that quite a lot of cities, and I heard this also, it's certainly also the case in Finland, have seen, the typical urbanites, the young people also looking for spots more in the regional level. And as of course, this conference is not just about cities, it's also communities. I wanted to kind of see if, you are hearing more about that, because of course, if the companies are developing regional hubs and the people are moving out of these dense centers, whether you think that is something that's permanent, what impact will that have on mobility, and how does that kind of reflect on the work you do as one of the leaders in that field? Are you working on that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can try to start to elaborate my thoughts. Of course, the future is very much unknown, but indeed, I think the teleworking or different working habits are here to stay. So I think it's like a smaller part of us who will return to 5 days per week at the office, or would like to return to that kind of normal. So that might really have a big impact. We don't know yet what it eventually mean, but from the transport planning point of view, I have heard that there has been serious thoughts or discussion that have we faced that peak transport now? So is that randomization of our travel patterns, does it mean that for the first time in the history, actually the traveled kilometers or traveled vehicle kilometers, they are going down? That is indeed very interesting. It might have then long-term impacts to our infrastructure, to the different hubs, what we are planning in urban structures, how cities are different city parts are working together, like housing and office location. All that, again, from the transport servitization or mobility as a service point of view, I think it's basically good for us, because if that means that your travel patterns are not the same for 5 days per week, or that 5+2 structure doesn't apply anymore, it just means that you a combination of different services and modes will probably serve your needs even better than in the previous situation. And also it might make the dependency on the car, or attraction to car bit more, serving you a bit less than it was in previous situations. So yeah, but it's really interesting, although too early to say anything for sure.
Yeah. Leo, are you seeing some of those?
Yeah, so as Piia said, it's very early to say, and but we can only think. I think we fast-tracked of maybe 50 or 100 years, not only on the question of working remotely and working from home, even if it's going to have a huge impact. And I fully agree with what Piia said on the fact that I don't think that many people will go back to 5 days a week at work. But I think that further than the question of working from home, there is a lot of shops have been closed. A lot of people who have never ordered online have been forced to learn to order online. Having things being delivered at home is something which is now common, and we have seen a change of habit. So now that I'm used to that, why should I drive? Why should I take the subway half an hour to go to the shop, since I could just get it? And when you think about food also, a lot of the restaurants have been closed in many cities, and I'm hearing a lot of people, which is obviously just a local thing that I'm hearing, but a lot of people who never ordered food online and who now are getting delivered for something that used to be a restaurant. Now they are inviting friends at home, not too many people, and then they're just ordering food. And this is a shift which is moving way beyond the question of working remotely. I've heard that Uber was considering pivoting toward focusing on delivery of goods instead of transporting people, which is, I think, a huge sign of where the money is, because I believe that they're able to see the numbers. So that huge change in why do we move, because that's where it's coming from. If we don't need to move to buy things, if we don't need to move to work, then it's only going to be like seeing friends, well, working as a nurse, anything like that, obviously, but then it will be things that will be more social, and we can expect all the pattern related to that to change. The last thing that I want to add is that shared mobility and public transit have two different pace. Public transit, like having a bus network, is not something that you can change in a few months, and the public transit agency have an extremely slow pace. So I think the impact that COVID had is strong, but I'm not hearing a lot of company in public transit afraid to die. But in shared mobility, we were saying early 2020 that 2020 was going to be the year in which we were going to see who will survive. And then COVID happened. So yes, in shared mobility, the pace is way higher, and the impact of COVID will be way greater.
And when you say the impact of COVID, do you mean well, what do you mean with that exactly within shared mobility?
What I mean is that just before COVID, 2019, we had an explosion of startups, an explosion of the offer. We saw all those vehicles being popped out in our city, and we had an offer which was crazy and a usage which was very low. People were just starting to use. And the offer have starting to die in 2020, because that's how VC funding is working, when the usage and everything has pushed us to change our behavior. So how will be 2021 for shared mobility? I have kind of no idea, and that's what is making it exciting. For public transit, I think I have a better idea. Occupancy is the main concern. Service will be slightly reduced, but not too much. But for shared mobility, I don't know.
Very cool. Piia, do you want to comment on that? Because I think you might have some additional thoughts on that, or Gert, or...
What I see, I agree that on shared mobility it is maybe too early to say, and it has been strange, and we will see how people revert back to their old habits. But I agree on the delivery at home. That's something that is here to stay, and we also need to have a solution for that. Also, cities will need to think about those last mile transports and things like that, how they will handle that. And I think a lot of I think there will be a lot of innovation on that part, and I see a lot of cities thinking about how do we handle these logistics in the cities, because we don't want all those fans suddenly trafficking through our cities. We want to do that in a very clean and climate way, and how do we handle that? That's something that I see a lot of things in happening. The other things, it will be a bit too early, but yeah, I agree. We won't go back to 5 days at the office anymore. So I see the offices, become smaller, becoming these smaller pots, and then people will go to their local pot, if I'm not mistaken. But we will see how that.
You say that like it's not fun anymore. They go to like it's not cool anymore. Yeah. So are there any final kind of itches that you want to get rid of before I head into the closing part of the session? No? All right.
I think
yes, I knew somebody was itching there. Yeah.
I think that those are very exciting times for public transit, and I think that we are very privileged to be working in those years and to be able to live what the next few years will be about.
Yeah. I agree. So, Piia, any last remarks, or do we?
Yeah, well, it was pity that I didn't include one more slide in my presentation. It's one more quote from the Back to the Future trilogy, but it was saying that basically no one knows what the future brings, but it's us to decide. So and exactly in that phase we are now with the mobility as well. We should harness the tools what we have, digitalization and data, to make our transport and urban transport system and cities more resilient and sustainable. And the only way to do it is together. So exciting times indeed, but I think it's going to very good direction.
Very, very nice. With this, I'd like to thank all the speakers. Also, of course, this event is quite different than it was last year. We don't quite come to the door, but you can switch on the computer and have at least part of the experience. I do look forward to the day when we can at least travel to an extent. Who knows? We might work with a hybrid form with hubs or pods, as Gert calls them. So it's something we're also thinking about. I'm quite curious, to look at these topics we've talked about in a year's time and see, how much did change? Did we revert to old bad habits, or did we kind of seize opportunities? Or the ones who did, how are they doing? Things like that. So I think it's a very fascinating topic. I was really happy, and I'm very happy to have had you guys to talk about that. Yes, it's the first time I also moderate, so it's my time to. Normally, I jump in and then do the transition. So with this, I'd like to thank the speakers, and we are now heading towards the next session. I have to cheat very quickly because this was yes. So that is the session. It's a keynote by Jean-Noé Landry, who will be talking about the advantages of collaborative data governance in the open smart city, also out of Canada. So if people have noticed, we have now officially departed from the European continent, are in the Americas. And for the Europeans who might have ideas about going to bed, so after the America session, there will be a DJ set, and the DJ is actually European. So if he can do it, you can do it. Listen in to some tunes later. But meanwhile, we'll go to Jean-Noé. Again, thank you to the speakers. It was an honor, a pleasure, and we'll talk to each other soon. Thank you.